Hey everyone, welcome to the Real English Conversations podcast, the podcast that helps international professionals communicate clearly, confidently, and naturally in English for work and everyday life. I'm your host, Curtis Davies. One of the biggest communication challenges I see with my students isn't grammar. It isn't vocabulary, and surprisingly, it isn't even pronunciation. It's that they struggle to communicate their value. They know they're talented, they know they're experienced, they know they have something meaningful to contribute, but somewhere between what they're thinking and what actually comes out in English, their message loses its impact. This week's guest believes that the same thing happens in business. Companies don't struggle because they have bad products. People don't struggle because they lack ability. Often they simply haven't aligned who they are with how they communicate. This week's guest is Sam Ghanem, a fractional CMO, CEO of SG Inc., brand strategist, keynote speaker, and the creator of the Congruent Brands Convert framework. With more than 25 years of experience spanning print manufacturing, marketing, systems, branding, and leadership, Sam helps entrepreneurs and organizations align their voice, values, and messaging so they build trust, create stronger connections, and grow with confidence. She has shared the stage with internationally recognized speakers such as Brian Tracy and Mark Victor Hansen, to name a couple. She also serves on the Better Business Bureau Board of Directors and recently delivered her TEDx talk called It's Contagious, exploring the power of leading from a place of internal congruence. This week, we're going to explore what authentic communication really means, why confidence starts long before you speak, and how professionals can communicate with greater clarity and executive presence, and why your message becomes far more powerful when it reflects who you truly are. Sam Ghanem, welcome to the Real English Conversations podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Sam, I'd love to start with your own journey. So let's begin here. You've spent more than 2 decades, that's a long time, helping businesses build stronger brands and clearer messaging. But every expert has a story. Can you take us back to the very beginning where everything started for you and explain how your career evolved from print manufacturing into becoming a branding strategist, a keynote speaker, the TEDx speaker you became?
Of course, thank you for what you do here. I do really believe in it, and I really believe in the power of communication and communicating effectively and clearly, uh, and surely multiculturally. So,
Nice.
my career started when I was 19. I worked for a very large print manufacturing company that was South Florida based. We were small in size and incredibly mighty in what we covered and in our scope with regard to who our clients were. Our clients were like anyone in the world, from the military to big pharma to everything in between. And our tasks really were more on the print side of packaging, labeling, marketing instructions and materials. And the client was actually not the end user, but instead, let's say, the engineering or sales department of said client. And I learned kind of backwards, in a sense, that these departments can only create and sell those things that they understand from an application perspective. So when it lands to the consumer, it's clear, like, hey, this is the thing I need to solve my problem. This is the remote control for my air conditioning. This is the clicker to turn my car on, like the super basic consumer goods. And I got quite good at translating engineering speak and client speak, particularly because I was young, I was hungry, And I wasn't afraid to be like, I'm so sorry. I don't understand you. What is it that you just said again? And I learned that my favorite question is why. And I probably ask it at nauseum, and I don't care because we want to seek to understand. And I think that that's very obvious in a space of either, cultural differences or languaging differences. But imagine you're speaking the same spoken language and yet you still don't understand each other. So I got quite good at asking why and asking for clarity and keeping the mind of the beginner. And in that kind of seeking to understand, I was I grew from accounting and admin and purchasing to being the executive vice president by the time I was 33. The owner retired and I took over the company. And at that point, we had about 49 or so employees. So again, small in size and massive in impact. And I really
Hmm.
got quite kind of obsessed with how this business had legacy of 40 years, how it was a family owned business, yet it did not operate in any way, shape, or form like one. And
Wow.
then my job kind of asked of me, so to speak, to be the face of the company. And so I became a speaker and I'm using air quotes, not that anybody else can see me, but the speaker piece, I would just want to invite the audience to recognize that if God gave you a mouth, then you are a speaker. And I'm saying this to say it doesn't mean you have to take a formal stage. The moment that you open your eyes and you step out of bed in the morning, that's your first stage. And I
Nice.
learned the importance of that because I wanted to make sure that I understood my own messaging and I was clear on my own values. So when I stepped out of bed in the morning onto that first ground, which was my stage, I embarked on my day whole. Now that didn't happen overnight. It kind of happened as a byproduct of a pretty insane story. In 2020, I bought a promotional marketing company that I wanted to place in the portfolio of businesses that I was building, to learn
Hmm.
very shortly after that the owner had misrepresented the financials and I lost everything in the process. Lost
Oof.
the building, my home, my relationship, became an alcoholic. Ironically, he sued me, so I spent 2 years in court. And all of this to say, teaching myself the importance of internal messaging and congruence,
Right.
understanding again that the first stage I take on is the stage that I step out my foot out of the bed in the morning, and realizing that when I'm clear, the rest of what I put into the world is clear. And the opposite's true. When I'm confused, what I project into the world is confusion. And so I
Hmm.
have this idea that came to me from my first comedy coach, and that is our job is to find our gift, develop it, and give it away. And I would say to answer the question of kind of how I went from, printing and branding specific to branding,
Right.
marketing, messaging, and speaking was because I believe that as a result of a loss, it's like a pruning of sorts. Apparently, I think pruning is preparation, not so much punishment. And I now know
Hmm.
that I had to walk that path to get the lesson of our internal messaging being so clear. And so that's kind of how the speaker piece was born. And specific to the TED Talk, it's contagious. The way you treat yourself spreads is exactly that narrative. It doesn't matter to me what you're building externally. If your relationship with self is in a place of darkness, that's exactly what you'll project into the world, and that's what will mirror you back. And I
Right.
want to be everyone's friend, so I want to give a warm hug to everyone, including myself. And so that's kind of essentially the route of sorts. Something I want to add, and it's something that just came to me as you're speaking. We can get crystal clear on relationships outside of us, and we can even get really clear on our business and how we line up our offers, who our ideal clients are. I mean, I'm a marketer, right?
Right.
The first and foremost narrative or the conversation that I'm most concerned with at the start of any given moment or day is the conversation with myself. And I'm sharing that really candidly to say, I'm today years old when I learned this, right? And in that way,
Nice.
I'm like 3 years old and I embrace it. I make a joke, I'm the youngest I've ever been, but I mean that truly. Whether you're learning literally a new language, whether, an Arabic to Spanish, Spanish to English, right? Or if
Right.
you're learning a new language, like a new narrative and a new way you speak to yourself, it's language nonetheless. And for me, a lot of my life was built around external practice, how I spoke to others, how I showed up for others. And I don't know, but I sometimes I still think I've got the training wheels on, but I'm happy to have them. And the internal conversation is the first one that I would always invite the audience, yourself, myself, everyone to really look at first, because what we should do on the outside is a direct mirror.
Hmm. Yeah, it keeps you centered and grounded, right?
Hmm.
And really focused on how you want to show up for not only others but most importantly, yourself that day, that week, that month, that year. You have to be centered and grounded with yourself. And doing that first, what a great idea. What a great concept. I don't know how many people would even think or consider about, talking to themselves or having a conversation with themselves, but it can truly help
Can I give
for
you an
sure.
example?
Sure.
So we all talk to ourselves, and I know this because we speak horribly to ourselves. So we already know we
Right.
have a narrative. Like we approach ourselves with a standard of excellence that's unrelenting. We don't give ourselves a lot of passes. We're like, Sam, you should know better, right? We all do it.
Hmm. Yeah.
During this experience of it was a loss, but in many ways it was a gain. And they were parallels. So it was very difficult to live in that reality. And specifically in my sobriety, I will share so candidly that it took training. And some days, admittedly today, I even needed to exercise this muscle. It's to pretend I'm not talking to myself, to pretend that you're calling me as my friend Curtis and you're saying, listen, I've just had the following things happen and I'm really feeling inadequate. I'm feeling highly disappointed and I genuinely don't know what to do. I should have known better. This is not acceptable. Whatever you're sharing.
Hmm.
And instantly, and some days it's probably audible, but I'm okay with it. I listen, this side is the sunnier side, so I'll take it. But I
Right.
genuinely speak to myself almost like like I'm outside of me, like, okay, Sam, where are you at right now? What is it that you need? Almost to the degree as lovingly as you would speak to a child. Sometimes it's as simple as, do you need a glass of water? Have you had food? Do you need a walk? Do you need a pause? Do you need a break? You need a nap?
Okay. Yeah.
It feels a little crazy until it feels like I'll go crazy if I don't do it.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I make a joke, it's my community service. I'm like, "My narrative today is for the sake of the community."
What a great idea for almost like reflection. I feel sleepy. Well, do I have time for a nap? Yeah, I do. Okay, well, I'll take a nap, set an alarm, and then I'll feel better.
Exactly like you would do for a friend or a kid. You'd be
Right.
like, "Okay, are you fed? Do you need water? Do you need to take a walk? Should you just be still for a little bit?
Hmm.
You Snickers? Are you hangry?" Like, you just right? And over time, you put those reps in, it becomes so simple. It becomes
Yeah.
so simple. And I admit to you, every single day, I open my eyes, I step on the first stage, which is my bedroom floor, and I'm like, okay, kid, we're going to tackle the day. I say it like I'm syncing up a Dropbox from my head to my heart every day.
One idea that immediately stood out when I was researching you and doing my show prep for this is your philosophy of congruence. Now, this would be great business English, brand new vocabulary for many of my listeners who are my students. They probably have never used this word before or heard it or know exactly what congruence means and the philosophy behind it. What does congruence actually mean? And why do you believe authentic communication always begins internally before it ever, reaches another person?
So again, these were not things I knew natively, or I just kind of was born with this handbook of, this is how I'm programmed. It was exactly the opposite. So I can tell you my evidence is based in my lived experience, right?
Beautiful.
Not even in my textbook education. For me, and in the simplest of forms, congruence means how you do one thing, you do all things. It means that when you speak, you feel resonance. You feel this like almost like when you get those goosebumps when someone says something and you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you really felt it. And I am speaking 100% of the time. And I'll give you an example. If we focus on the few times we say something and we're kind of like, ugh, when I said it, it felt icky. Like I didn't love it. That's a
Right.
quick congruence check. And it doesn't mean there's like a huge problem and you have to resort back to your, internal dictionary and rewrite. No, it just means like, honestly, I didn't love how that felt. Like I said it and I don't feel connected to that thing anymore. That's how you can quickly check in with yourself to say, am I congruent or am I not? Another way of looking at it is from a business perspective. When you declare what you do, when you say what you make that declaration. Not only do you feel it like in yourself, but is it true?
Right.
There's a yes and a yes or a no and a no. There's not like a maybe. That's just not how that works. And the reason I say that is it is the quickest way to kick yourself back lovingly into alignment. So the same way I do that kind of, are you hungry? You need a walk? You need sunlight? What do you need? The same thing. Like, am I vibing with what I just said? In a broader spectrum, Every time you fall out of congruence a little bit, think of so many degrees, they add up. And so in a day, if a day is 100% of a pie, maybe there's a slice, a third of the day that I said things and I was not really deeply resonant with them. Imagine a third of my pie every single day compounding over the week. Not only do
Ooh,
you feel it, you feel exhausted, you just don't feel authentic. It chips
yeah,
away at your not only your integrity, your actual value. People's perception of your value is a direct mirror of yours. So
right.
if 3/4 of the day am I living in a congruent space where I do one thing the same way as I do something else from the same heart posture, over
Mhm.
time, the days that I live outside of congruence stack up and it takes a toll on you. It surely takes a toll on your business. And I used to think there were ways that you could confirmation bias so I could argue it for or against my position. And
Okay.
then I'm like telling stories, you're publishing your own right. Like, this doesn't make any sense, Sam. And I just figured the safest thing to do within myself is to ask myself, is this true for me or is this true about me? Whether in my narrative, whether in how I declare my business, like, hi, this is what I do. I build systems behind scalable brands. Is that true for me? Is that true about me? There might be a day where it isn't. And that's okay. Because what's cool is when the answer is no,
Uh-huh.
you have an opportunity to shift.
Right.
And to me, you almost want to find those moments because I learned how powerful it is to change your mind. As we evolve as people, what we used to feel called to changes sometimes. What an
Uh,
interestingly fun opportunity to go. I used to love going to the left side of the route that I walk, and now I just really love going to the right. And all of a sudden, you have new scenery,
nice.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, and those become stepping stones to greatness.
Yeah,
Many
absolutely.
of my students work in multicultural or multinational companies. They often tell me, I know exactly what I want to say in my native language, but when I try the same thing and I try to speak English and try to express myself, I don't feel like myself. I don't sound like myself. How much of communication is really about language and how much, in your opinion, is about confidence, self-belief, and knowing who you are?
So I appreciate the question, and I specifically appreciate the order in which you kind of tiled out each of those categories. And I could say to you, all of them matter all of the time. And I do believe that they feed each other. So if we stay with the idea of congruence, the how we do one thing, we do all things. If we sit in the reality that our bodies literally know when we're moving in alignment and when we're not, we can feel physical resistance when we're not in alignment. When I'm speaking, I'm surely more confident if I'm reporting the news accurately and I believe in the thing that I'm saying and I'm so razzed up about it. If I feel a disconnect and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have to say this thing and like I really don't even believe in even 50% of what I'm saying, everything about your communication style, your tonality, your posture, your facial expression, your general, like I like to say, like I'm buzzing. And all of a sudden you're just like not buzzing. And I don't
Yeah.
mean to overly exaggerate or embellish, like saying 150% of the time, everyone, no. But I'm saying life's, right? But 80% of the time, just be with this concept. If you feel the thing you're declaring, you feel more confident. So take it if you're a subject matter expert. If I know what I'm talking about, I feel great about it because at least I know what I'm talking about. Now take public
Mhm.
speaking. Some people are petrified. They're like, oh my God, there's all these people. The best advice I got is from the same gentleman who gave me the idea of find your gift, develop it, and give it away was every room you enter is a unit of one. So whether the room has 1,000, 100,000, or one, so you and I are in a room right now of one unit, irrespective
Right.
to the number of guests, attendees, listeners, any of that. And in my mind, I really enjoy one to one conversations. So then I ask myself, do I enjoy one to one conversations? Yes, I do. Is this a unit of one in front of me? Yes, it is. And some of this sounds like I'm selling myself on some BS. I'm not. I'm really
No.
simplifying the effort because if you think there's a dragon in that room, there is. You know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
reduce your confidence just by the story you tell yourself. If I'm more confident and I'm more grounded in the effort, I surely feel more valuable. In my experience, there's a tipping point and it's really, really narrow and it's gradual. It's not generally like the swing is so big, but I realized over time, you just chip away at this. it almost becomes disintegrous. And I don't mean disintegrous meaning out of integrity outside of you. I mean out of integrity inside of you. It's like doing
Uh-huh.
something every day that you don't want to do, and you do it every day, and eventually it's like very clear that you don't want to do it,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So imagine the
Yeah.
narrative inside. You're like, every single day I do this thing and I can't stand doing it. What I learned was a lot of these practices usually invite us to an external practice. And I was one of those people having those very conversations until I experienced what I shared. And I don't recommend that happening. I don't wish that on anyone. But I will
Right.
say the level of introspection and true practice in my narrative, my internal confidence, my internal value, my congruence in all of me is a world of different. And I did none of it outside of myself. I didn't necessarily buy programs. I didn't have the option. I didn't have the option to really do much. And I have
Right.
these realizations over time, realizing the system I've been working in prior clearly isn't working. It built success, but to a point. And I
Uh-huh.
didn't feel successful. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel valuable.
Wow. And you used this system, this framework that you're talking about to do the opposite, to feel yourself.
I used to think confidence was like an ingredient you grabbed, like when you're cooking something and you're like, I'm going to throw in a little cinnamon and a little confidence, right? And I'm not saying that that's not true, that you don't have a hype song or that you don't call like your hype committee and you're like, guy, I'm not saying you don't do that. That's like the extra. But I'm talking about my internal hype crew. Is this true for me or about me? Am I ready? Do I feel ready? I'm ready. I put in the reps, Sam. You're ready. Okay. Am I qualified to speak on the topic? You're qualified. You're absolutely qualified. Okay. I'm prepared. I did. And there's a unit of one waiting for me. Unit of one. Okay. Yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes, and yes. And then I call my hype crew. And then I play my hype song. And then I go out there.
There you go. So you have your internal hype crew
Yeah.
and an external one as well.
And
Yeah.
for the audience, sometimes it's okay to have a crew of people in your mind. Sometimes it's cool. It doesn't always make you
Hmm.
completely crazy to have a conversation, a real honest conversation with yourself. You have it in there and it's generally a less than desirable tone. So for me,
Yeah.
I'm just basically saying, what would happen if I flipped the script? What would happen if I was so kind to myself? What's the downside? And I can tell you there is none.
No. Yeah. It's such a great idea too. I've personally done it where I hype myself up internally. I get prepared for doing podcasts or teaching English lessons, but I really love what I do. And it really does work to have that personal cheerleader inside you, and it pumps you up. It really does. It makes your day. So it helps when you think, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm making this grammar mistake in my second language, or, these thoughts can really develop into dangerous things if you let them, but you can do the opposite. You can pump yourself up and give yourself some credit and some trust instead of doubting yourself, and the opposite thing happens. That thought or saying or what you're telling yourself can become something greater as well. What you say to yourself, you have to be very careful, whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing, because it will manifest. It will develop into something that well, if it's positive, then it's going to be something great. If it's negative, it's going to be something horrible. You don't want that.
Well, the other thing that I think is a very powerful concept, particularly in those that are learning, another language or learning English as a second language. Every language has its own alphabet and we spell. When
Right.
I learned that spelling, when we speak, we cast a spell, I thought to myself, holy cow, I'm so conscientious of what I say outside. When I talk to you, I'm so conscientious of what I say. I'm so like, 1 second, let me show up for Curtis. Let me understand what he's saying. Let me hold a space. Let me support him. Let me give him advice and let me be an unrelenting friend, but let me be kind.
I
And then when it came to me, that rule didn't apply. I was like savage. And then I
right.
thought, well, if spelling casts a spell, it's not suggesting when you speak to a particular person, it's saying when you speak, period.
Yeah.
So then I was
Yeah.
like, well, there's got to be another way. And for the audience, in terms of, being fearful of making a grammatic mistake or inverting a word or any of these things, the one thing I would encourage is there's literally zero failure in trying, like
Yeah.
none. There's a zero downside of trying.
Yeah. Yeah. And trying is the best thing you can do, because if it comes out and it comes out great, then awesome. And if it comes out not exactly as planned, then awesome too. You can learn from that and grow from that. And that's the mindset to have for sure. One thing that I really admire is that you combine business strategy with psychology and storytelling. And why do facts alone rarely persuade people? Why do stories connect so much more deeply? And how can professionals become better storytellers, even if English isn't their first language?
What's really cool about the world that we live in is how dynamic and diverse it is. And in every culture, in every country, on every continent, in every single time zone, we have art and movies. A movie is a movie irrespective of the language. And when you're literally embarking on the journey that's the movie, you're like fully enrolled in the story. You have the protagonist and the antagonist. You're in it like to win it. For the transformation, you want to see what happens at the end.
For
Why?
sure.
It reminds you of something. There's some kind of resonance, meaning a connection. And if you take that logic, which is something called story branding, there's a book, and I'm certain it's translated in a million languages. It's called How to Build a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And then there's How to
Okay.
Build a Story Brand 2.0. And he opens the book and he says, I'm going to ruin every movie that you've ever watched for the rest of your life.
Spoiler alert.
Right.
Yeah.
And he argues that every movie has a guide and a character, and they meet. And there's a turning point, a point of contention, a problem. And then
Okay.
they go on a journey and it results in some kind of transformation. And outside of perhaps a couple exceptions of cliffhangers, you could probably go, yeah, 100%. Yes. Story branding a business is the same thing. So you're telling a story of a character, in your case is a client, that meets a guide, in this case would be me, and they go on a path and there's a turning point. The character, the client, is experiencing some sort of pain. The guide helps guide them to a transformation. The transformation makes the character a hero in their own story. I am the guide holding the flashlight to tell you it's safe to take a step. I'm just describing the story brand to you, and you're enrolled already because it in of itself is a story. The reason being is you can see yourself in it. If I came to you with a bunch of facts and said 98% of businesses can't sell because they are selling confusion and they're not selling clarity, and did you know? You'd be like, okay, she lost me after the third bullet point. I don't know how this applies to me, and I have things to
Yeah.
do. But if I speak to you in the sense of a story specifically related to the transformation or the pain point, it
Right.
creates emotional resonance. If somebody shares with me a story about how they turned around their struggling business,
Okay.
I have deep resonance. It was literally me. If someone says, did you know that 1 in 3 small businesses fail? I'm like, okay, that's great for the stats. Thank you for the trivia. I don't know what you want me to do with this information.
Right.
And not
Yeah.
to be funny, but it is funny. They can be boring. Stats alone are kind of boring. A story
Mhm.
asks for the viewer or the audience to kind of lock arms with you and take a ride for a second, just like a
Right.
movie. And the
Yeah.
truth is, just like in a movie, you can land on a lesson, you can land on a vision, you can land on a gift, exactly
Uh-huh.
like you do in a movie. I love this because it knows no cultural barriers. Every culture has movies, every culture has art, and it's
Yeah.
interpretive.
Yeah. Through movies, music, art,
Yeah.
all of that.
Comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comedy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which you're experienced in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've never had a comedian on the show either. So that's a very interesting aspect of you and your life. How did that transpire? Did you start that at a very young age, at around 19 as well?
No, I think I thought I was funny when I was a kid. I don't know that anybody thought I was funny, but I did. If the roles were reversed now, I would really not care if they thought I was funny as long as I thought I was. But when I was
Nice.
a kid, life was rough and I left home really early. And my great uncle swooped in, literally speaking, to save my life. And he was quite funny. He was quite entertaining and he was a really big personality. We call him a magnanimous personality, just this huge spirit.
Right.
And he was the patriarch of the family in every sense of the word, safest space. And the interesting thing is, in all of that, he used to have so much joy. And ironically, he would laugh at my father, who was very abusive at the time. And that sounds crazy to say, but I
Yeah.
watched as a kid and I was like, that's allowed? Like, you can do, you're allowed to laugh. Like, that's allowed? And he'd be like, yes, look at this is ridiculous. And I'm a kid, I'm like 15 years old. And
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, if he said that I can laugh, then I'm laughing. I tucked it away in a place and life got really serious and living is serious and it's hard work and all this stuff. And I had all these external successes and all these things. And the business that I purchased that I found out was misrepresented was
Hmm.
doing some printing for a comedy production company that would put on pop-up productions at various venues in my local town in South Florida. And just some fun facts. I'm Lebanese. The owner of the company was Lebanese. The comedy production company, rather, was Lebanese.
Right.
And that's not a prerequisite to be in my life. It's just a kind of fun fact. And
Hmm.
we bonded immediately. I learned a bit about the business. I helped the comedians build brands. I helped them with their swag. I helped them with their brand identity. And then the same gentleman gave me a gift of joining a comedy workshop where I met the gentleman who taught me how to find my gift, develop it, and give it away.
Cool. Wow. That's amazing. And it's really part of you. I don't think that comedians try to be funny, that they're just natural, funny spirits. They were born that way.
Yeah, or we say we woke up like this. I still have quite a long way to go. I feel in my journey, but again, there's no downside to trying. And the interesting thing about the question you raised, facts versus story,
Yeah.
comedy forces you, irrespective of your style, to enroll the audience in something. How?
Mhm.
A fact? That's ridiculous. It's got to be a story, a hook, something that goes, I want more, right?
Right. Yeah. Something that is funny or humorous becomes something memorable.
Yeah, like the irony. The irony
Yeah.
is funny. Yeah.
Hmm. I teach my students, if you want to remember something, let's describe a picture. Find the five funniest, most ridiculous pictures of your vacation, your family vacation. And this is how you're going to remember the vocabulary from the story of each picture because it's a funny story. It's something ridiculous or hilarious. So even that is, I guess you could say, comedy in itself can help you to memorize things. It's all storytelling. It's all experiences. Watching some of my favorite comedians, that's what they do. They tell these outrageous stories and they're so memorable that people repeat those stories. "Oh, I watched this comedian and he or she said this." So you're retelling the funny stories that you heard for the first time from that comedian. And what better way to memorize than with something humorous or satirical? So I love comedy, and laughter is the best medicine.
So joy and laughter literally change your body's biochemistry.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
when I think about that, I'm like, oh, it's science. It has to be true. And it's like, I would dare I say a success story. Like I am. Joy
Right.
leads my life. That was not the case. And for me, again, I love that it defies barriers and languages. If someone's laughing uncontrollably, I don't care if they don't speak a word of English, you're going to eventually start cracking up,
Yep. Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's totally contagious.
Which is a great segue into talking about your TED Talk. It's contagious, right?
Mm, yeah.
What was the core message that you wanted to deliver to that audience when you were giving that talk? What memories do you want them to leave with?
I want them to understand that they are one of, and that they were made in a particular vision that made it so that there's not a single soul on the planet that can fill the space they do, that they're here by design, and that while that's very ethereal and perhaps aspirational, that there are practices that can walk you back literally to yourself. And there are
Okay.
daily steps, some of which I've alluded to. It's far too simple. My problem is far too great. I'm too far in the hole. I don't understand what's happening. This is beyond my pay grade. I don't understand whatever excuse that, right? And then I'm here to just say it's completely revolutionary when you apply it. And again, I'm a byproduct of it, as are many. And the takeaways are simply this: you deserve to speak to yourself like you're your very own best friend, because you are. You think so or not. You deserve to choose your own company, because if you don't, why would anyone else?
Nice.
You deserve to treat yourself like the most viable asset that you are. And in my case, walks, literal walks, walking around a neighborhood when I
Mhm.
was the absolute worst health I've ever been in my life with zero explanation. I still
Wow.
don't have an explanation till today.
Hmm.
I went from walking to the mailbox, and I was, an athlete in terms of bodybuilding sports and so forth. So it was wild. And the walks proved to be walks back to myself, choosing mercy and grace, using the same tools that I would use on my friends, on my loved ones, my mom, my sister, any single stranger that approached me with a problem. I would exercise grace and mercy. And so what I did was I started to address myself like my own best friend.
Mhm.
And I spoke to myself the way I would speak to you. Unrelenting, literally unrelenting, unrelenting in my love. And no matter what, I was able, thank God I'm able bodied, to take a walk. And the walks were very interesting because there was this metaphor that I was constantly running from myself and running from my life, and I was a runner. And it's so interesting that the walk for me ended up being the walk that I walked back to me.
That's beautiful. I love that. Be your own best friend. What better advice? Yeah, and when you slow down and take your time, I'm a walker as well.
Yeah,
I start my day not
same,
even with coffee.
same.
It's walk and water. Hydration is important. That gets my blood going and flowing to the brain, and it sets me up for the rest of the day. I go on several walks throughout my
Me
day,
too.
but I
Me
always
too.
start my day with a walk. And the thoughts that enter my head are, okay, this is what's going on in my day. I get massive clarity on how my day is going to be and how I want it to be. And it's always positive, always positive.
And it doesn't have to be so grandiose. Mine started at 5 and 10 minutes,
Right. Mhm.
like
Yeah.
and now they're an hour. It started with a quarter mile and now it's, 3 to 4 miles. It's like they're
Yeah.
stepping stones. And to your point, I make a joke sometimes when I'm having a tough moment. I'm like, I'm going to go walk in circles for the sake of my own sanity.
Whatever works, right? Whatever
Yeah.
helps, and it gets you there. It gets you to where you want to be. We live in a world where people constantly compare themselves to others and everyone else on social media and off social media as well. Many professionals feel they have to sound smarter in their presentations, meetings, interviews, more polished, more impressive. Do you think that we're losing authenticity because of this and we're trying too hard to impress others and we're losing who we really are, our personal identity? And how can someone develop what I like to call executive presence without pretending to be someone they're not?
Did I lose myself? Yeah, I had no idea who I was. Maybe I wasn't lost. I just didn't even know who I was, generally speaking, because I was living in that sort of posturing, performative, people pleasing place that I was raised in. And I learned that's across any culture. I don't know any parent that doesn't want their kid to be the best dressed, best spoken, well read and on time. Like, I don't
Right.
know any parent that doesn't want that. So I don't know that it's malintent or any of that, but it is unfortunately a reality of many of us. And then because we
Mhm.
have this narrative that it's never enough, our efforts aren't enough, we could have done better, we know better, you're already showing up as a percentage of yourself because you've already knocked down particular parts of you before you even got started. So I would be careful to say, it's compromising authenticity as if people are trying to pretend. I believe that most people desire in their deepest place to show up whole and authentic. I just
Nice.
don't know that some of us know how, and I did not.
Right.
And because I
Mhm.
didn't have these tools or I wasn't applying them to even know that you could, when I was authentic, it was very messy because I was coming undone.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
now authentic is maybe my hair is washed and maybe it isn't. 95% of the time, I'm going to do my best to be on time and I'm probably still going to be late. I identify as late and lost, but my intention was to be on time,
Right.
right? The perfection ideal, that part I feel is what is truly distancing people from themselves. And I can't say cart before the horse or chicken before the egg, because again, I don't know anyone who doesn't want to put their best foot forward, but there has to be a tolerance. In manufacturing, call it a tolerance. You can't get 100% of what you're manufacturing 100% right 100% of the time. It's called fallout. You literally cannot. So what you do is you manufacture a percentage more. So what you yield in the end is close to that 100. And I use the example with a person. I can do my best to show up and check the boxes for myself to show up in my best self. If I've achieved 80 out of 100% of that, I decide that that's an acceptable grade for me and I keep on keeping on.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
just choose not to live in the place where I believe that most people are showing up to misrepresent themselves on purpose.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's despite what I've been through. I choose to see the world through a lens that we want in our deepest place to show up authentic, but sometimes we don't even know what that means.
Mhm. It can be a real battle because we're always our own worst critics. It can get easier, right? If you do it in the right way with the right mindset. So, yeah. One thing that you've written about recently really caught my attention as well. You said, the room gets better when you're in it. I absolutely love that statement. What did you want to bring across? What does that really mean when you say the room gets better when you're in it? And how can someone intentionally improve every meeting, conversation, or presentation simply through the way they show up?
I invite them to take up space and I invite them to take up space on purpose. There's not pre-made space. The room literally
Mhm.
expands when you enter it. And the more authentic you are when you walk in and you're just like, oh, my only job was to show up. I'm here and surrender to the outcome because I did the hard part. I got in the car and I got there.
Right.
Like in reality, and it is wildly oversimplified, but that's the truth because the reality is the rooms we choose not to go in because we decide to stay in the room in our head. We've done a
Mhm.
disservice to the physical room and we've surely done a disservice to the space between our ears.
Yeah.
And we're living a hypercritical aspirational life in that case. Whereas if you go and you decide to take up space, you're living a life on purpose.
Nice.
You're like, I'm gonna show
Yeah.
up and I'm gonna make that room better just because I showed up in my presence. Sometimes you don't even know what's on the other side. We speak about this a lot in networking. You need an intention, but you don't know who's gonna be there. You have no clue. And you have no idea who you're sitting next to. You could be sitting next to your next best friend, your husband, your wife, your next strategic partner. You have no clue who you're sitting next to. So if you show up with deep presence and you're ready to take up some space, now taking up space doesn't mean you have to be big and bold and boisterous. It might just mean I'm going to take up space by showing up. Energy, we are a body of energy. There's a frequency we give off.
Yeah.
And you only
Wow.
miss the shots you don't take. So I invite everyone listening to understand that they make the room better when they enter it and their only job is to show up and take up space.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how many people are in that room either. I'm sure you get nervous if you have to speak in front of 5 people, 500 people, 5,000 people. What's the biggest crowd that you've ever performed in front of as a comedian or presented in front of? And were you nervous?
That's an interesting question. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I took the advice of the unit of one. And so
Uh-huh.
when I get in there, it's almost like I have one eye and I'm like, here's my people. And I scan the room. I moderated a panel and introduced the keynote speaker at an expo recently. It was like maybe 3,000 or so people. To tell you the truth, doing comedy in front of an intimate room is much harder.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
significantly harder because we're energy, because we take up
Uh-huh.
space. You feel it. You're like, "Oh," you're like, "I just wish I had 50 more bodies. I don't even need to know who they are. I just wish I had 50 more bodies." It just depends. And do I get nervous? It would be a lie to say that I don't. Recently, and the TED experience illuminated some things about myself that I did find quite interesting. I'm grateful to the support that I had because I had some really interesting things. Like on the night of rehearsal, I blacked out entirely. That has never happened. I'm a very seasoned speaker, very seasoned in this space. And
Right.
what did I black out on? It was my own talk. Like, I'm forgetting my own words. It's not like I was
Ooh.
reciting someone else's talk. But I say that to say something also grew in me because the
Uh-huh.
next morning I showed up and I was just singing like a canary.
Yeah.
It was wild. Nerves, I'm learning. Nerves and excitement. So anxiety and excitement live in the same place in the body.
Right.
So sometimes my narrative repeats consistently, I'm excited versus I'm anxious or I'm nervous.
Yeah.
I basically am
Yeah.
telling the audience I talk to myself a lot. That's what I'm saying.
It's so true for my students going through job interviews. I'm like, it's not that you're nervous. You're really pumped. You want that job. You're excited. It's your brain tricking you and
Butterfly.
saying, oh, yeah, exactly. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. It's crucial information, that's for sure. Let's finish with some practical advice. But if one of my listeners is an engineer or a project manager, a doctor, an IT professional, an entrepreneur, even, and they speak good English, but they still don't fully believe in themselves, what's the way? What is the way to feel better about themselves? What's the first step that they should take this week, if they can, to become a more confident communicator?
So I would really love them to do this, and I would be glad to do it with them. Just to address themselves as their own best friend and to ask their best friend how they're feeling and to remind their best friend all the reasons why they are qualified, credentialed, and experienced to do the thing they're doing. Because before they became the engineer, the doctor, the lawyer, the speaker, the entrepreneur, they have human value. They have natural born tools and gifts. And if I was being asked by my friend or my friend was calling me to tell me they felt inadequate, I would remind them of all the things that make them so exceptional and so special. And that's the task that I would ask that the listeners do with themselves this week. And it sounds a little nuts. And every time you do it, it not only gets easier, it gets more fun. It gets more fun because sometimes I call myself a kid. I'm like, hey, kid,
Hmm.
you're great. Listen, you're super. You got this covered this week. You crushed it. You did XYZ. You went on your walks. You drank a gallon of water. You had good workouts. You got a lot of reading in. You followed up with your clients. You called your mom. Like you're doing
Yeah.
great. And listen, there's no downside to doing so. There's only an upside or a sunny side, as I say. And I invite the audience to do these things that seem a little quirky because it brings you closer to you versus a
Hmm.
lot of the actions we take bring us further from where we are and we fall in love with our identity and our career. But you're a person before you're your title. You're a person before you have your resume.
I think that is crucial advice that you can immediately apply. Anybody, no matter what you're doing, what your profession is, that can take you miles further than you've ever expected. So before we finish here, where can people, my audience and listeners, learn more about you? Could you tell everyone where they can find your website, watch your TEDx talk? Of course, that's going to be on YouTube. Connect with you and learn more about your work and the awesome things that you're doing.
So my website is I am Sam Ghanem. I am Sam, GHANEM.com. On Instagram is at GHANEM. And on LinkedIn as well under the same name, Sam, GHANEM.
Excellent. And I'll put all of those links in the show notes so people can go to the show notes and click on them and go directly to you. Sam Ghanem, thank you so much for coming on the Real English Conversations podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm just so proud of this work that you're doing, Curtis.
Thank you. And now stay tuned for more information on how you can learn one-on-one with me with some one-on-one English coaching in the 90-day challenge.